first and foremost, just thank you so much for joining me on this podcast, especially on 9/11, and we're very close to Washington, D.C. So this has been 6 years in the making for me. I started my podcast because of my mentor, who I revere. She's retired Chief Master Sergeant Susan Mace. When I was a brand new senior NCO, she started a book club. And at the time, I'd been in for 17 years. I hadn't read much since high school. I was 35 years old. But we started this book club, and it has spawned. I feel like I've blazed new leadership trail, and it's because of this book right here. And it's really the genesis of what is now passing the torch. So you, sir, have had that much of an impact on me. And my podcast has had over 6 figures in downloads. 6 figures in downloads. And it's because of your message.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, you never know. I'm just glad that it inspired you. And it still inspires me to think about some of the lessons that I learned in my life in the POW camp that are captured in that book.
Yeah, and I was telling you beforehand, so I drove from Ohio today, and I just arrived maybe an hour and a half ago, but I had 4 flat tires on the way. It's a long story. But as I was doing this, I was thinking, I'm going to interview a POW later. So in my mind, I'm having this conversation like, Martin, it's not that big of a deal that you have 4 flat tires. And thankfully, I was able to get that resolved. Also, I want to mention, I've read Leading with Honor, and I researched you on some podcasts, and other podcasts I've listened to, or I have listened to on a couple other podcasts, watch YouTube videos. Where's September? Is this shoe weather or is this foot weather? Because I remember in the podcast with Jocko, you mentioned about you didn't wear shoes between, was it April and September?
Yeah, May and September, May and October. Yeah. We went barefooted out in the country back in those days.
Yeah, no, it's great stories. I want to share something, obviously, from your book, and just kind of.
Now, you're talking about this book right
Leading
here?
with Honor.
Leading with Honor.
Yeah, and I know you have 4 books now, right?
Well, I have 2 leadership books, and then the POW romance book came out recently, so that's 3. And I have another book I wrote in the 1990s on your career in changing times. It's out of print, but it was about career planning and how to find the career that fits you.
And you have Engage with Honor. Yes. And then the POW romance that just came out this past May.
Yes.
I ordered it on Amazon 2 days ago. So admittedly, I have not read it, but I did order it on Amazon.
Good.
So, and my wife, when she sees that Amazon Pocket, she's going to be like, what is this?
She'll like it.
She'll like it.
Yeah.
But something from, and since Leading with Honor, I've read maybe, I don't even know how many books I've read now. So I went straight from your book to Extreme Ownership, and I showed you my notes, and there's been so many others.
Good.
But from Leading with Honor, from the books forward, and Leading with Honor, Lee draws from the POW experience, including some of his own personal story, to illustrate the crucial impact of leadership on the success of any organization. He highlights lessons and principles that can be applied to every leadership situation. Senator John McCain, United States Senate, 1936 to 2018. With that, regardless of time, so when I read that, and I went back through, and I read your book twice, and I skimmed over it again this weekend. Regardless of time, era, and situation, what are 2 lessons and principles that can be applied to every leadership situation?
Well, I think it always has to be character first, and then mission and people. You have to accomplish the mission. You have to take care of the task and the assignments that have to be done. But you also have to take care of the people, and you have to care about them. And the reality is human beings have a heart, and in their heart, so to speak, in their mind, their emotions, they want to be valued. Every human being wants to be valued, wants to be cared about, and wants to feel worthy. Well, when you smile at somebody, you're saying you're valuable and I care about you. Even a nice smile makes people feel better. But when you manage people and you listen to them and say, what do you think? Or when you say, good job on that report you just did, that was excellent, thank you. Then you can also sit down and say, now, I was expecting you to be finished with this next report by Friday. Tell me what's happening on that one. I don't see it being ready. Are you going to be ready with that? And then you can kind of start to hold them accountable and coach them. So the most important thing is character first, and then you have to be mission focused and have accountability and be clear about what's expected. But you also have to be relationship connected to let people know you're valuable, you're important. You said people are not machines. They're not computers. They have a heart. They have an emotional core. And if that emotional core is feeling bad or nasty, or they feel threatened by you, they're not going to perform well. Even when they try, they're not going to perform as well as they could. If they felt like you believed in them, they're going to work hard to follow up and try to live up to that. And it's just a reality. But a lot of people who haven't been thought about it, and if you stop and think, as a leader, you have to stop and think and reflect. Okay, what am I doing? What should I probably not be doing? What should I be doing more of in the future and less of in the future? That's the way you manage yourself to be a better leader.
No, that's great. And actually, before we started recording, we were discussing a possible quote for this episode. And would you mind sharing what you said about your 4 friends and because you mentioned just now people and relationship connections, but the 4 friends that you had mentioned, what would they want you to do right now and focus on, and what quote would they want you to use?
You know, in the war in Vietnam, I lost 4 roommates. Now, 2 of them were shot down and didn't come back before I went down.
Do you mind saying their names?
So in the war in Vietnam, I lost one of my friends, one of my roommates. He'd been my roommate in part of my combat training, Tom Kilcullen, from a Penn State graduate. But we went through undergraduate pilot training together. We're close friends. He went down in August '67, and that was so hard on me. And I just had to say, hold it. I got a war to fight. Then 2 days after I went down, my buddy Lance Sison went down. And of course, I didn't know about that for a couple of years, but he was on the ground wounded, badly wounded for 46 days and captured. They brought him to Hanoi, and he died shortly after he got up there. And then one of my other friends in my squadron, who was my roommate at Da Nang, flying combat, he went down 10 days after I did and didn't come home. Fantastic. All these people, fantastic people. I admired them so much. And then one of my POW cellmates for a couple of years died 6 months before we came home. He got something like typhoid fever or something and died. So I lost 4 roommates in that war that were fantastic guys. I admired them. They were tougher than me and better than me, I thought. Well, almost, being a fighter pilot, you know. But, you know, when I think back about them, I really miss them so much, and yet they're not here. And so one day I was thinking about how would they want me to see this? And I came to the conclusion they would want to say, don't ever forget me and what I did for my country and for you guys. So remember me, but then go do your thing and don't worry about me. You're on your own. You're going to do well. Just you go do your thing. Don't let me slow you down, but just kind of remember what I sacrificed.
That's amazing. And I love just the smile on your face as you're saying that. So there's one question that I really, and if we don't get to all the questions, that's fine. But there was one that I really kind of that I did mark as a priority, and I think ties into this is, what are your thoughts on the psychiatric effects of war?
Well, the thing about war is that it does impact us psychologically, and therefore, if we come home without having time to decompress and deal with it, you're going to have some PTSD problems. That's been consistent even as far back as we know. People who fought in war and lost their buddies and that sort of thing and got shot up themselves have had some emotional problems. The thing that we learned in the POW camps, fortunately, because of the pressure put on them by families and wives and families back home and the people of our country, the communists stopped the torture of the POWs in the fall of 1969, right after Ho Chi Minh died. The new leadership was younger, and they could see that they were getting bad PR around the world about their treatment.
2 years into your captivity, right? Because I think...
Yeah, that was 2 years into my captivity for me. Now, some guys had already been there 4.5 years. But for me, that was 2 years after I got there. And they stopped, the new leadership decided to stop the torture. And for the most part, they did. And beating stopped for the most part. And it went to a live and let live. And then there was a raid at the Santé camp by the Special Forces. We had moved out of that. I'd lived there 2 years, but we had moved out. And they didn't know for sure that we'd moved out. And they raided the camp very successfully. But we were 7 miles away in another camp. And within 48 hours, they moved all POWs back to the Hanoi Hilton and put us in big cells where Vietnamese prisoners had been. Now, the Hanoi Hilton, Hoa Lo is a name, but it was named Maison Centrale by the French in the 1890s. It was a Bastille prison built by the French when they took over Vietnam in the 1800s. And it was 14-foot high walls, 4 or 5 feet thick, embedded shards of wine bottles, glass, broken glass, embedded into the top with an electric wire all the way around. Nobody ever escaped there. But it was a city jail also. So they moved the Vietnamese prisoners out and put us back in these big cells that were probably 1,800, 2,000 square feet. So I was in a cell about 1,800 square feet with 52 guys for almost 2 years, 24 hours a day. It had no walls in it. Okay. And so you have to learn to live with people. You're going to get to know yourself because they're going to point out some things in you that you can't hide anything. The good, the bad, the ugly. When you live with somebody 24 hours a day at work or at home in a POW camp, they're going to see some stuff about you. And you had to take ownership for that and work on it. And we did. And we actually built an extremely strong relationship, a brotherhood. And a brotherhood is so important, a relational connection at the heart, caring about each other. Now, sometimes you say, well, I don't want to be around that. And you go down the other part of the room and just leave them alone. But we cared about each other and we would risk our lives for each other. That's how much we cared. So that enabled us to, day by day, get healthy. If we'd have come home in 1968 or 69, after all that torture is going on, we would have been a mess. We would have been crazy. We would have had PTSD above and beyond what you could imagine. But we had 3 years locked up with our buddies who had been through worse than we had, and we had time to get healthy. We knew that if we went home with bitterness, anger about our captors, shame about what we might have given in to do, because they could make you do something, they wouldn't let you die, doubts and fears about ourselves, we'd be a mess. We'd be in shackles, handcuffs, and leg irons, because anger and bitterness ties you up. It keeps you from being your real you. Yeah. And we understood that, and we worked on it every day, day by day. And unfortunately, but fortunately, we had plenty of time to get healthy, emotionally healthy before we came home. And we have much lower PTSD than the combat veterans who fought in the South for a year, but lost their buddies and got on the airplane and flew back home and sat down with their family at dinner 24 hours later. They hadn't had time to decompress emotionally.
4%. You referenced it in another podcast that I listened to, where Vietnam POWs, their PTSD rate is 4% compared to,
much higher.
Across,
yeah. And ours was pretty light, actually. Even at 4%, it's pretty light.
Well, you mentioned there's two things I want to kind of explore, but by the way, this is my buddy Ian. So,
hi there. I didn't know if you were a spy or
no.
Okay, good.
How much, because now with the Air Force and I think just across the DoD, there's a lot of, rightfully so, more emphasis not just on physical health, but mental and emotional health.
Yeah.
But with the camaraderie, you mentioned the keywords, the brotherhood. And I know just from reading Leading with Honor, the college courses, right? Is that a Hanoi fact? The college courses, right? But how much do you think that played into the mental and emotional health along with the recovery aspect, especially tying into that 4%?
Well, for us, our mental health was, as I said, a day-to-day thing. We knew that if we went home with what we had, we'd be a mess. And so we worked on that day by day. And when we came home, we were so healthy that people just couldn't believe that, we got out and went to the Clark Air Base Hospital, and they were prepared for us being a mess. And guys were so, calling home, talking to people and everything. We could handle most anything. And some guys called home, and their wife said, "I'm out of here, man. We're not going to be married." And the guy said, and they were sad, but they realized, well, I'm free, and I can't control that. And I'm sad about it, but that is what it is. And so I think we learn to deal with things, suffering. We learned to suffer and believe that we could come through the other side and things would be okay. We believed that, and it turned out that way.
Yeah.
So it was that was a powerful lesson for us. Now, what's happening today is these young people, they're not as connected person to person. Now, they may be on the phone with somebody,
right,
but they're looking to all this social media and stuff that's trying to divide us. Okay, us and them. It doesn't matter what its race or gender or whatever it is. The social media is trying to divide us, and you can bet your bottom dollar that the communists in China and Russia are pouring millions, billions into all of that social media stuff to try to divide this group from that group, men from women, old people from young people, town people from country people, anything that they can do to divide us. Whereas what we know is that when you're in a community that cares about you, you're going to be healthier because they're going to say, well, I think you can do this. I'm proud of you. You'd be good at this. That's so uplifting to have people that care about you. When I think back about my growing up, my friends, a little town, I grew up on a farm in the country, but 9 miles away from my high school, Commerce, Georgia. My friends' parents, we all knew each other.
Yeah.
Okay, small school. And when I met their parents in town or at an event, they would treat me like I was somebody and like I was important.
And this is in a key time because in the 1970s, America, like depending on what part of the country you lived in, there was a lot of protests right against the Vietnam War, and where some vets were spit on.
You're for it or you're against it. And but in my hometown, growing up in the 50s, these people, these adults treated me like I was a important, valuable person. That gave me a lot of confidence to deal with everything. To be a fighter pilot and deal with things there, and to be a POW and deal with things. But also I had great leaders that were courageous, and, their role model, their mentoring and their example really meant a lot to me. This guy's tougher than me. He'd been through more than me. If he can do it, I better try and hang in here. I can do it. But these young people today, they're on their phone. They're not connected with somebody who's really a real person connecting with their heart. And that psychologically is undermining. The mental illness of teenagers is skyrocketing right now.
Agreed. And it's, I've had on past episodes, I've had actually her name is Celeste Headley. She's considered a communications expert, and she studies the whole communication but talks about how, just for example, even for me, I'm 41 years old, about to be 42. But in high school, if I was interested in a girl, this is back in the 90s, granted, we had cell phones and pagers, but nowhere near like now. Right. If I liked a girl, I actually had to go muster up the courage to go talk to her.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a whole thing in itself. And then and then ask for her number, and then wait 3 days, call the house phone, pray to God her dad didn't answer.
Right.
But and there's a lot of misses on my part, but it's helped me become a better communicator today.
Yeah.
Where I think because of social media, that aspect is lost.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right.
Yeah. Do you have time for 2 more questions?
Oh, yeah.
I want to reference going back to Saigon because you mentioned about bitterness and a couple other things. But in April 2019, at a Saigon Award presentation hosted at the Pentagon, you were on a panel along with Lance P. Saigon's younger sister, Janine, and retired Colonel Tom Owens to discuss how Saigon shaped your lives. When discussing how you overcame personal challenges after enduring torture and losing the loved ones around you, I believe your response was on the subject of being a surviving POW during the Vietnam War, quote, "We realized that hate and bitterness will ruin you. It doesn't hurt them, but it will ruin you. We helped each other overcome that bitterness so that when we did walk out of that camp, we walked out as free men," end quote. So again, I just ask that you please expand. What advice do you have for people on how to clear themselves on the trauma they take from others?
I think you have to realize that pain and shame, doubts and fears are going to take you out of the person God made you to be. And you have to figure out a way to get healed and get away from that. And so in the POW camps, that was a day-by-day effort that really has caused us to be so free and to so healthy that we're outliving our peers, even though we were eating pumpkin soup for 6 months, twice a day.
With weevils, right?
Yeah, with weevils and bugs floating in it. And, we had no medical care those years. And so all of that, because we were getting healthier emotionally, psychologically, to believe that we had a good life, that we weren't perfect, but we're going to be authentic. We are acceptable people, and we don't have to pretend. That's powerful. When you're, I have a model, a secure, insecure, secure on the right, picture a sliding model, secure to insecure. Okay. Now, we all slide around on that a little bit because there's some areas where we're all insecure a little bit. But doubt, fear, pride, shame, anger, bitterness, all those kind of things are going to make you more insecure. Okay? And that's why I encourage leaders, speak into your people's lives and let them know you believe in them, you care about them, because that helps them slide over. It helps them believe in themselves. It helps them get healthy. But each individual is going to have to work to get healthier and turn loose of bitterness and anger and shame and guilt, because those are going to make you a prisoner of life. You're going to be in handcuffs and leg irons if you've got those. And so whatever it takes, if it's going to get counseling, I've been to counseling. A fighter pilot would never go to counseling, but in the 1977, 75, 6, 7, somewhere in there, my wife said, "I don't think we should live out here on this farm." It was my idea. See, I grew up on a farm, and I had been farming in the POW camps every day for 2 months, planning my farming out in Texas. And I pushed back on it, and she said, "Well, could we go to counseling?" And I said, "Sure," because I'm not threatened. But nobody went to counseling back then, especially a pilot, Air Force officer. I was a captain. I was a major then. And she said, I said, "Sure." So after 2 times and two sessions in counseling, I said, "You know what? You're right. We need to move on base." And we did. And it was one of the best things I ever did, go to counseling, and I listened. But that freed us up in our relationship to go on, and we've been married almost 49 years now.
Congratulations.
Our story is the last one in our new book, Captured by Love, Inspiring True Romance Stories from Vietnam POWs. So you got to get healthy, and love and caring make you more healthy than anything else. It frees you from the bonds that make you insecure.
That might actually be the title of this episode. I love that. Hey, sir, just wrapping up.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on veterans becoming victims in society after they return from war?
I think when the Vietnam War veterans came home, there was so much anti-war stuff going on, and people saw that as an emotional thing. We got to let them know those soldiers, they're over there killing people. Well, soldiers, that's their job, is to defend our country, and that means sometimes killing people. But the communists were killing a lot more people than we were. But it just kind of became a thing back then. And when our Vietnam veterans came home, for the most part, they were spit on. They couldn't wear their uniform in public a lot of places, and they were mistreated. They weren't valued and appreciated when they came home, and that was really bad. And that caused a lot of them to suffer even more from what they had just leaving their buddies behind. So one of the things that we need to do, and our country has done a really good job lately, I think, letting veterans know we appreciate them, we value them. We've got a couple of days in the year now when we celebrate veterans, but everywhere you go, almost people are saying thank you for your service to veterans, and that is so important, to let them know you appreciate them, because they're sacrificing for our country and protecting our freedom. They don't make the decisions. The decisions about what our military does are made in Washington, D.C. You need to take that up with your congressman.
No, that's good. That's great. I have some two lighter, fun questions.
Uh-huh.
One is, as we're closing out, if there's a movie made about your life, we already know the title. It's going to be, Leading with Honor. But who would play you in a movie? If not, I have some recommendations.
I don't have any idea. Those kind of things I don't think about much. I'd have to think about that a while.
I'll just say Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise? Well, that'd be okay.
Or Brad
Sure.
Pitt.
He's done a good job in playing some of those guys. He's short like me. And he in the Maverick Top Gun, I think that he kind of mellowed there. He was older and had mellowed a lot, and that was probably more like me, but I mellowed a lot too, through that. I don't know who that would be. I think the most important thing in my life is I've had good role models. And when I had bad role models, I was able to learn from them too. I said, not me. And even the best role models, there's some things about them. In fact, I was at an AFA event last winter, and this retired one-star general said, well, I kind of have a list of my mentors, of the things that I see in them that I want to do, but I also have another column of things I see in them that I don't want to do. And that's exactly what I've always done mentally. I've never written it down, but I kind of mentally do that because nobody's perfect. And so I admire my really good leaders, or I admire all leaders, certain things about them. But there's certain things about them I say, that probably doesn't work. They're doing that because they haven't gotten over that something from their childhood, or they are insecure in that area. When you're insecure, you overreact sometimes, and that's what it was. They were protecting themselves and doing something they probably shouldn't have been done. So I use all that to coach myself. I think the most important thing is you've got to always be growing. I'll be 80 in 28 days, and I am working hard to continue to grow. I want to be a better person. And I think you have to remember that above all, everything else in life, love is the thing that matters most. Every human being wants to be loved, and love comes in many angles. A good smile makes people feel loved. That's the simplest thing. All the way down to in a marriage, of the intimacy that makes a person feel loved. And so there's many angles in there, but letting somebody know you appreciate them is like a ray of love. And so connecting with people's hearts in ways by listening to them, encouraging them, believing in them, it's just so important to help them be healthy.
The last question I was going to have was if you could have a billboard anywhere in the world with your message on it for the world to see, what would it say? Where would it be? But I think you already answered about what the billboard would say. But I will ask you, where would you have the billboard be placed?
On the way into town. Not out of town, but on the way into town before you go in and make mistakes, so to speak. At the front door, not the back door.
That's great. Sir, I want to respect your time. I know you have some other commitments, but
Yeah.
Any final requests or ask for the listeners out there?
We started out talking, you said, what are some of the key components of leadership in life and for a leader? And I said, character first, then mission and people. And I think you always have to be on guard about your character because there's so many temptations and nobody has perfect character. And you have to be correcting back on course all the time. And so we have an honor code we developed about 7 years ago. It's 7 articles of like tell the truth.
Yeah.
Keep your commitments, those kind of things. But there's 7 of them. But they are so important that I would encourage people to go to our website, leadingwithhonor.com, and find the honor code and download it and print it out. It's free. It's 1 page, and it's very graphic. And just look at it and use it to coach yourself to be a person of character.
I'm going to have that in the show notes of this episode.
I'm going to give you a copy.
Thank you very much.
With me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Sir, I just want to say, first, thank you for your service. You matter. You're an amazing leader, but even better person. And again, just actually thank you for helping me start passing the torch because, again, you are the genesis. This book, Leading with Honor, I don't know if I wouldn't be the leader I am today without having read this book back in 2017. So just from the bottom of my heart, just thank you so much.
Well,
just for what you did for our country. And it's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's very inspiring to me to know that. Thank you.
Yeah.
You made my day.
You made my day.